brother was just a kid when they took him. They thought I'd never find this place. That I'd forget about him. They were wrong.
Control. It is a third-person action-adventure game developed by Remedy Entertainment. These are the same guys that made Max Payne 1 and 2. I believe they had some say in Max Payne 3, but Max Payne 3 was mainly developed by Rockstar Games. They also did Alan Wake, and before Control they did Quantum Break. And I'm a big fan of these guys because they mostly do a lot of their games are very like surreal stories in their games, and kind of dark, twisted kind of stories that they do. Very like movie like production with a lot of their games. Is a game that revolves around a organization called the FBC, and they're called the Federal Bureau of Control. They're a secret US government agency. They're tasked with containing and studying phenomena with objects, essentially like a UFO, something that is considered to be not from this world, or something we haven't seen before. This is an organization that takes these things that have been found in the world by whether it be strangers or people who've reported it. There's a lot of things in this game that remind me of X-Files a lot. It's a lot of things that have like, especially the lore of it, there's a lot of people who like stumble upon certain objects. For example, there's a fridge in this game, and the fridge is a object of power. It is one of these things that is something that is a normal thing, but at the same time it's not. There's something about it, there's a certain energy behind it that is not from this world at all. This is something completely different.
It is a receptacle for dangerous energies to hone in on, and they did. We don't have the details, but when things started flying around the disk, it was transferred to us. It's an object of power. OOP. Oops.
So you play as Jesse Faden, and Jesse Faden is essentially someone who has a personal story to follow in this game. So she is someone who is looking for her brother, and she believes that the FBC took her brother when they were children. In a little sense, at the start of the game, without spoiling things, she's sort of going in undercover a little bit, and she's trying to find out why the FBC took her brother, and why wasn't he released, why she never saw him again, why was he the one that was like completely gone and stuff. Very much a game that's going to make your eyes pop in terms of its quality and object quality. Destructible objects, destructible environments, that sort of thing. Like everything you see can be manipulated by damage, by a gunshot, by powers that you get in this game. Everything you see is not just a static object, it is a movable object. Every single thing you see gunshot bullets on the wall. Glass will smash depending where it gets hit, and certain patterns in the smashed glass will appear. It's a very much like a game that you would, if you wanted to show ray tracing and the capabilities of destructible environments with ray tracing on, or if you had a PS5 or one of the new Xboxes, this is a game, even though it is 2019, it still holds up in terms of technology with destructible environments and things like that. Very similar to Quantum Break. I know Quantum Break had similar things, but yeah, it's that kind of era. It's really, really amazing to kind of look at when everything is kind of flying about at the same time. It's got that very much like it's a weird comparison, but bear with me. It's got that Infamous Second Son kind of feel. I really like when I saw Infamous Second Son when it first came out, I was blown away by the look of that game. Like, that game is so underappreciated for the way it looks. I still think to this day it's one of the best looking PS4 games ever. Like, it's seriously amazing. The whole kind of vibe of this game is a very dark sci-fi movie feel to the entire thing. It's very story driven. It's very much following the story of of Jesse, but it's also following the story of this organization and trying to understand them a bit. They're very secretive. They're very much in the dark. You don't know much about them, but you kind of learn as the game goes on. It all takes place in one place, which is called the Oldest House. It is like a house that's sort of a maze. It's kind of, to a lot of people, might be a bit samey. There's loads of stuff to kind of see, but a lot of it is an office space environment. One of the complaints that people had, I didn't have too much of a complaint about it, but that's what you're probably going to expect in terms of like environments and stuff you'll see in the game. There's a lot of stuff that I liked with the voice acting as well, just going into graphics and things like that. Facial animations were very much motion capture. Like you can see kind of people's reactions a lot more clearer. It is very much the kind of same technology that they've used for things like LA Noire and things like that. So facial animations are great. It's a really, really good looking game, and it absolutely still holds up like 2 years later. It's still a stunning game to look at. I think this might be Remedy's best gameplay that they've done. I think it is. I think it's the best gameplay they've done in any game so far. It's a shooter. It is a shooter game, but it doesn't like overwhelm you with weapons and things that actually shoot and things like that. It is more of a case of, from the very start of the game, you get a service pistol, and throughout the game you are just upgrading that service pistol to whatever you want that service pistol to have. Essentially, there are times when you can upgrade the pistol to fire like a shotgun. There's sometimes you can upgrade the pistol to fire like an automatic, but I kind of call it like a little bit like old school gaming, because I kind of like the fact that you can have just the one weapon and you just work on that instead of overwhelming you with loads of weapons that have loads of different upgrades and things like that. It's merely a case of you have this one weapon. It can change forms essentially into a shotgun or automatic or whatever you want. It's not really a cover shooter game, so you're not going to be hiding behind cover. You can crouch. Too much games have been doing cover shooting so much. Like every game has cover shooting now, but Control doesn't, which surprised me because I immediately thought it was a game that had cover shooting in it. There's no health regen, so you literally have to go around picking up health pickups. Old school gaming. It has a lot of things that remind me of like old games, which is kind of cool because, again, Remedy made Max Payne, and Max Payne had a lot of things like that as well. One of the things I will say, which is kind of good as well, again, it goes against the grain of just shooting people in this game. You can't just use your gun all the time. You actually have like a limited amount of bullets that you can use. It has to recharge your gun, but it's a gun that you can't just fire a ton of bullets. You don't have ammo, essentially. It just recharges over time, and you use a certain amount of bullets. You can obviously upgrade to have more bullets and faster reloading and faster recharge, all that kind of stuff. But it is very much just, you have a gun, it is your main weapon, but essentially you're using a lot of other things to defeat enemies and shoot people and damage people and stuff. And one of those things, which is one of the main things with Control, is powers. Jessie has powers. She can upgrade them over time. Again, there's all sorts of different powers she can use. She can float in the air and things like that. She can block bullets with her hands, essentially, like telekinesis kind of stuff. She can dodge really quickly. Telekinesis. She can lift up objects and throw them at people as well. So there's a lot of, which is probably my favorite power-up. It's probably the one I use the most and upgraded throughout the whole entire game. The rest of them I was like, I was upgrading them a little bit, but telekinesis is the one that was like, this is super powerful, because when I run out of bullets, I have nothing to attack the people in front of me with. So one of the best things you can do with this game in terms of power-ups is use the telekinesis and just find an object which goes with the destructible environments. You literally pick up something that is in front of you, like an actual object. It's not just something that the game pulls out of the sky, like a magical bit of, like, I don't know, a box out of the sky. It is something in front of you. Wherever you're aiming at, that's what you're going to pick up. You can actually select things to pick up in front of you. It could be a chair, It could be a gas canister. So you actually have like this environmental battle as well that you play in Control, as well as the gunplay, which is something I really, really, really liked. There's not much to do open world wise, I would say, and I'll get to that in a minute. It's very much like, here's the main mission, those side missions, and that's it, I would say. I like the fact that it mixes in the gunplay with these powers and things like that. The gunplay is, even though the gunplay is your main kind of source of damage and things like that, and the gunplay is solid, there's nothing wrong with it. It's very straightforward, you know, in terms of shooting. I like the upgrades you can get for it, but combined with the powers, I would say the powers are the things that you're going to pay more attention to as the game goes on. Like, combining that with the powers is quite a really, really fun experience with this game. So I really, really like the gameplay. As I said, I think it's the best. Gameplay-wise, I think it's the best that Remedy have done so far. There is a lot of lore in this game, which is good. I love lore. Some people don't. I really love lore. I think it's great. It's really, really interesting. I really, really like the kind of world building lore that they built for this game. It's something that I was seeking out a lot. I was reading a lot of things. The downside to a lot of the lore, though, is there is so much, especially reading wise, there's so much of it to get. There was times I picked up so much I didn't want to stop and keep reading things, so I would eventually, like towards the end of like a playthrough before I turned the game off, I would read everything that I picked up on that kind of playthrough. So that eventually what it ended up being, and there was so much of it every single time I did a playthrough of this game. They have audio logs, and they're interesting audio logs, not just boring audio logs. They're interesting. There's not many of them, which is where I'm saying, like, you could have converted some of the written stuff into audio logs. That would have been really, really cool. But the fact there's not as much as I would have thought in terms of audio logs, and there's also kind of video logs. And the video logs are the things you'll probably remember the most, because they're actually kind of like training programs done by a person that works at the Bureau called Dr. Darling. He kind of has the most important parts of the world building in these videos. There's a lot of them to find as well. Again, there was a lot that I wish could have been more of, even if it was just audio form, because there's so much of the written form. But either way, the lore itself is vast, and it is very exciting to kind of learn about. So Jessie has her own kind of personal story. She's trying to find her brother. You can hear Jessie's thoughts as she's speaking to people, a lot like Max Payne did. You can hear what she's thinking about people when she's talking to them. So you get kind of glimpse into how she's feeling about the whole situation. I didn't like her personal story as much as the kind of world building. That's one of the things that kind of, and the game kind of ends with her personal story more than the world itself. It didn't really hit me as much. I was intrigued by it like throughout the game, but there was a certain period, especially I think final third for me, is where I'm going to say Control loses a bit of control. It just didn't really, I want something to kind of affect me a bit. And I think the fact that the world building itself outside from Jessie's story was so interesting. I was so interested by that. And Jessie's story was fine, but I don't know, towards the end it just fell off for me a little bit. I think it was just a bit like, when things got revealed and things start to come up, it's like, oh, okay, well, that's that done, and then move on. The ending is really underwhelming. The ending is just pretty much, the last level is, I was so frustrated by it. Not really in terms of story, but the terms of how they do the last level. It ties into a lot what I said with, towards the end of the game, they just throw enemies at you. They just keep throwing enemies at you. And it happens, I think, 3 or 4 times towards the end, and it just gets a bit like, oh, okay, we weren't doing this before. I wouldn't mind like a boss fight. It's just what they did was just throw a bunch of enemies at you at the end, and then that's the ending. That was that was it, essentially. And it felt a bit underwhelming.
There you are. You are here about the job. Janitor's assistant. You need to go to the interview. Go that way to the elevator.
Thanks. Elevator that way. Got it.
I really like Control. I think it is a really, really good game. I enjoyed a large part of it. I enjoyed the first third and the second third especially. The final third let me down a little bit in terms of story and the way the level is kind of designed towards the end. It sort of ends on like a that's the ending kind of thing, and it felt a bit underwhelming considering everything else that happened in the game. I think it is a solid game. I really, really think it's a solid game. It's tons of fun in terms of gameplay and using the powers and the gunplay together with Jesse, and it has a real like mysterious vibe about the whole thing. Very X-Files-y, very Alan Wake-y, I guess, as well. It's for people who liked Alan Wake, especially, I would say. People who really enjoyed Alan Wake, but wanted like an action-packed kind of Alan Wake. I think Control is that, and it does a lot of things really, really well, and I like it. I think it's a really, really good game. After all that being said, I'm going to give Control a very respectable 8.5 out of 10.